Donald Trump facing a loss in court that he is trying to hide. A judge ordered him and his administration by proxy to remove the ham-handed effort to just add his name to the Kennedy Center, a center that already had a name. The facade, though, has now been blocked by a tarp so that there won't be an actual video shot that easily captures Trump's name being removed or leaving it up for however long they do to try to distract from the actual loss. It may seem like a small and petty example of a larger problem, which is that we live in a country governed by someone who keeps trying to break the rules and laws, small and large, and put his name and likeness everywhere. Now, someone might say, okay, there goes the media again looking at this one thing on the building. Is it really that big a deal? And I think it's a fair point that the name on that building doesn't necessarily affect people's lives. But there are other acts that are of a piece with this which do. We're now learning that when judges were ruling against Trump's deportation agenda during those clashes last spring, the White House considered suspending habeas corpus itself, the longstanding right enshrined in the Constitution that protects you from a government just seizing you without rights. You might recall Lincoln suspended habeas corpus during the Civil War. We don't have anything like that these days, but Stephen Miller wanted the DOJ to look at whether they could get away with this. Now, this is bombshell reporting from New York Times reporters that have been working on a larger forthcoming book. Now, habeas corpus is kind of the be-all, end-all, because if the government can just snatch you up and you don't have any rights to protest or question how you're being held, well, then they could do that to anyone, right? They can do that to judges or journalists or political opponents, and everything else kind of falls apart. Now, this is fundamental. The Constitution does have, of course, a type of suspension for exigent national security circumstances, which it refers to as rebellion or invasion. You can think of that as existential war. Times columnist Jamelle Bouie points out that at the time, we know habeas corpus has been such a bedrock part of the American legal tradition that its suspension during the Civil War, an actual rebellion, was hugely controversial even then. Now, we all often talk about, as Rachel says, watching what they do, not just what they say. This happens to be a time where we had to worry about both.
The Constitution is clear, and that, of course, is the supreme law of the land, that the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus can be suspended in a time of invasion. So I would say that's an option we're actively looking at.
Miller publicly proclaiming that they were looking at that option. Others inside the administration were alarmed. They viewed this as a sure loser that the courts would stop or interfere with, and something they just shouldn't do, like this is a bad thing. The White House says officials look at many different lawful options to implement the president's agenda, with Trump being the decider. That was sort of their response. I mentioned that we see this lawlessness on matters both small and petty, as well as extremely significant. Your view at sort of this autocratic era that we are in, and how Americans should understand what is this bombshell reporting, that they were really looking at suspending this right and may yet try to.
I think one should look at this as really demonstrating the administration's absolute total contempt for basic and fundamental constitutional rights. The habeas corpus, due process, these things are, as the clip from John Adams, I think, suggests, are elemental to the Anglo-American political tradition, legal tradition, to put it in fancy terms. Like, they're really at the foundation of everything. As you said, if the government can snatch you and not have to explain anything, that's kind of game over for your political rights, for your legal rights, for everything. And so the fact that the administration was contemplating this is genuinely quite disturbing and is a sign of how little regard the White House has for the Constitution. I'll note real quick that in that clip you played of Stephen Miller, he referred to your privileges under the Constitution, your privileges. No, those were not privileges. Those are rights, fundamental, inviolable.
Yeah, and something that, lawyers and perhaps intellectuals think about maybe more than people going about day to day is you have a rule, you look at the exception to the rule. You have a safeguard, you look at what it protects. And in this instance, they were discussing whether they could suspend this right for what they viewed as unauthorized immigrants or people who are here without their papers or documentation. But of course, if you can say that this person is X, say undocumented, and then hold them without any legal process, then there is no legal process to protect an American who is not even of that category, or a political opponent. Or you could imagine a doomsday if you say, yeah, the critics, journalists, or a judge. You say it's a really close Supreme Court case. You can hold one of the judges and say, well, we declare them disappeared. It sounds very Orwellian or extreme, but is that not what this type of abuse allows?
That's absolutely right, especially when you consider how difficult it can be to prove your status. We have many, many stories right now, right, of people being snatched up by ICE or Customs and Border Protection and having documents that say that they are an American citizen or they have legal status, and that not really meaning anything. And so a world where not only can you be snatched up and then you have no legal process for proving who you are, but then even if you have documents, that's no guarantee of proving who you are. It just makes everyone's citizenship fundamentally provisional and subject to the whims of whomever happens to be in power or holds their authority.
You've been following this closely. Do you feel, from your evidence and reporting and looking closely at this, that the fever is breaking, that they're getting away with less, or is it too early to say that?
I would say that they are getting away with less in as much as they are losing cases at the district court level. Of course, once stuff gets appealed up to the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court operates in the shadow docket and will hand wins to the administration on a wide variety of issues. But very often, at least in that first stage, district courts are sort of holding the line on enforcing the law. I would say that the thing that is actually most significant right now is not courts, but simply politics. I'm reminded of a quote from, founding era of I forget whom. I apologize. Observing that really the best way to vindicate the people's rights is through election, through public accountability. And I think the fact that the administration and the Republicans as a whole are facing a potential wipeout in November, that the president has entered almost like a terminal decline in terms of his popularity, has also done quite a bit to sort of at least put the brakes on the administration somewhat. They're not as aggressive as they were this time last year when they felt they had the wind at their back.